Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope everyone is okay. I was going to talk about Brexit. I had plans in my notes to talk about the Brexit bill, which obviously hasn't passed, and but I thought then something else came up. I thought, like, well, Brexit's kind of everybody's sick and tired of Brexit. Even I'm sick and tired of Brexit, and we're probably going to have another few months of this. But something's quite controversial has just come out of Canada recently, and if you know Canada quite well, there's various different districts. There's Quebec, there's Toronto, there's Ontario, and so on, and they're quite independent federal states. Now, what's come out of the Quebec government's law? Uh, we have to first notice that secularism is high in Quebec, and I'll go into reasons as to why. But they've actually proposed a law to ban religious symbols for public workers in Quebec. Now, this is just Quebec; it's not the whole of Canada, but it's still quite a precedent. So, what that means exactly is that the ban would affect doctors, teachers, judges, lawyers, anybody that's involved in, obviously, police, as well as fighters, anybody that's involved in any sort of public. It would involve community organisers, anybody that's involved in sort of campaigning, not just in terms of career routes, but just anybody that wants to contribute positively in any sort of form, in a formal capacity. It would also involve laws, or at least policy, where people would have to show their face when going on to simple things like a bus. We know who that's targeting, and it's also like sort of suggesting like you can't even be like Muslim women who wear niqab can't even be trusted to get in the bus safely without blowing everybody up. So you know the Islamophobia is quite palpable there. Um, and yeah, so like we have to also remember that the history of Canada is not just that it was occupied by the British, but also the French. And Quebec is staunchly French, in not just in terms of like culture and language, but also mindset. So it's no surprise that you have militant secularism marching forward in the way that you do in France. And you know it is essentially just still a French outpost, culturally speaking, and we've got to remember, like, you know, French was the first nation to really lead the way on the niqab ban, and all the racism, the xenophobia, and Islamophobia that kind of came with it. So it's not surprising that you have Quebec to do this. However, to announce a blanket ban on religious symbols is quite astonishing, and it's quite a sort of it's basically secularists trying to flex their muscles to try and essentially civilize everybody else. And the most ironic thing is for me is that, you know, the minister who's pushing for this bill is calling for calm around this particular law. And I found that quite astounding, given that this law, without a shadow of a doubt, is going to disrupt so many people's lives. It's going to stop people that want to contribute to a positive, multicultural society. They'll be barred from distinct routes of career, especially those that really have an impact on equality, especially like posts like, you know, judges or solicitors or lawyers, or like people that are involved in law enforcement, or people that are involved in creating like in healthcare. Anything that creates a positive sort of outlook of quote unquote integration, and also justice, the justice system overall. And like these politicians, they're the first type of people that say, well, minorities don't integrate with us. And it's ironic because myself and others have been saying for a very, very long time that the people that go on and bang on about integration all the time, those politicians especially, they're the ones that's pushing these divisive laws that stop people from quote-unquote integration. And really, the truth of the matter is they are the ones that don't want to integrate with the wider community, and even to be quite frank, the rest of the world. Because guess what? White people are a minority globally. Let's not forget that. So there's no justice in this at all. There's no equality. There's no fairness. In fact, quite the opposite. Now, the good news is that religious groups have in Canada denounced this quite harshly, as well as the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has denounced it quite publicly. But it goes to show, like, with militant secularists, when they get into power, and a lot of them, like, for you to take note as the listener, a lot of them are rampant Islamophobes. They're not just anti-religion; they're rampant Islamophobes, and they use Islamophobia as a sort of a spearhead to try and essentially push their aggressive secularist agenda. It just shows when they get into power what kind of damage they can do to ordinary people's lives. So which is especially for Muslims, for any minority for that matter, why politics is a necessity and never a luxury. I think too many of us take politics far too with too much laxness. We're too relaxed about the people in power that's deciding how we should live our lives, and this example is a key one, and like we have to in a broader respect look at this as a dynamic. Yes, if this law is passed, it will be unprecedented, and yes, it will essentially encourage other secularists to do the same, but these people have been around for a long time. If you all probably remember the new atheists, the quote unquote four horsemen of the apocalypse. Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and them jokers. They've obviously reduced in influence because they've just been found out to be complete bigots, white supremacists. In fact, at least some of them. But these people are around, and they're not going to go away. And unless we actually demand our equality for ourselves, primarily, if not for others, and unless we demand our freedom more broadly, they're the ones that will eventually, as we've seen, with Islamophobia was just a niche issue. They will essentially entrench into the corridors and power, decide how we're going to live our lives, and essentially cause means in which institutional violence is possible. And when I mean institutional violence, I don't mean necessarily actual physical violence. I mean the kind of institutional violence that laws enable people to essentially essentially oppress them, are oppressed by the system systematically by the virtue of those laws. And then the niqab ban is a key example of that. We should keep an eye on this. This is massive if it goes through, and we should not underestimate the further backlash if it is essentially followed through. But this is something that we need to keep an eye on, and I hope you'll be keeping an eye on with me. That's it for now. Happy Brexit Day.